Welcome back. My name is Ivica Cartello. You are watching React School for the Total Beginners. useParams. useParams is a function what coming with root React 6. Where we need useParams function? We need useParams function on in component date. Date is title and text concretely our choice concretely depend about our click on menu. Date is concretely object in database. Let's go to see database. Here is a database is like this. It is one object, second object, etc. What that object have ID, title. It is properties of that object: ID, title, and the text. Date component, singular date component, will display title and the text. Here it is. It is title and the text. It is date, singular, but dates, it is this many here. And if you look at address, dates is complete dates, plural, is a menu. It is title, only title from every object from database. And when we click on that, we have date, singular, concretely date. It is concretely for that day, August 11, I have text from our from my journal. And this on the component date, I need useParams, because component date must know what is parameter in web address. Must know, does it 1, 2, 3, and must know what we click. It will know only by address. Somebody must take it number. Then that is useParams package from React Router DOM. And okay, here is date. It is component date, and in here we must have title and text. Date here is a singular, but I think complete object. Date, it is contra of plural, dates. Here is date singular. Date is object, and that object there is a title and there is a text. How he know which object it is? Here it is. Constant date equal get date, and here is number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. ParseInt is only, it is function for control that it is 10 is base of our number. And you look at params, this variable params equal useParams function, and that params there is with that in that row our params have properties data ID, and in that properties he useParams take number from address. useParams take number from address 1, 2, 3. Take parameter from address. And here is useParams is object variable. That object there is properties date ID, and this is complete will give us 1, 2, 3 from address, comma, and 10 means that it must be integer 10 in base of that number. And we have here getDate function, and in this parent is parameter 1, 2, 3, controlling that it is number, it is not string. And date is object with the ID, title, and text. And it is date because getDate function give us object, give us one concretely object. And that object date, there is a title and there is a text. And this return function date return title and text. And it is here. Title, and text. Here it is. Okay, it is date. But now I ask myself, what is it? getDate. Okay, useParams, we speak about that, coming from React Router 6. And what is getDate? What is date ID? It is a number from web address, but why syntax is date ID? At first, getDate. getDate import coming from database. Database, look at that. Database. Here is database, and behind the database we have two function getDays. We look at when we look at plural dates. Now we look at date. getDate. getDate is function, our customized function. We write our function with parameter ID. Return dates. It is array of complete dates. It is complete array with all object inside. Find date. Again, date is object. I can write it what I want. It is object because dates is array of objects. Object members is object. This is object. Members, one member in curly brackets. I have here 3 objects. It is object. Because of that, this parameter is object, singular object. And that object, there is ID. Every object in dates, there is ID, title, etc. But here we interested only in ID, date.id equal ID, equal this ID, getDate ID. It means that getDate function, our customer's function, must received, somebody must give that getDate, that parameter value equal parameters from web address. It must be, in the end, 1, 2, 3 concretely number. And for that concretely number, we will have concretely one object. Find give us only one object. Find is a method of array, but that method give us object, not array again, because like map is method of array, give us array, but find filter also give us array, but find give us not array with one member, but one member without. It is not array, it is object, but that function give object from that our database, give object when it function know concretely number, and when we call function. And where we call function? We call function on date, component date. Import get date function and call. Here is calling. Here is calling. Constant date. It is variable date. It is declaration and instantiation. We declare and give value, assign value to that variable. And which value? That value, concretely value, concretely ID, because here is concretely ID. Concretely ID, base 10, and integer 1, 2, 3, and get date. There is here concretely parameter ID, and because of that, get date return object with title text, and here is date, it is object, dot title, date, dot text, and we have this title and text. But there is something more. What is date ID? Why syntax is date ID? It is last question for that component date, singular date. Why date ID? Okay, let's go see index.js. Because of that root, if we here write x or y or z, ID only, etc., what we write here must be, because you look at date, component date, it is connected with component date, we must write here. We must write here again in root. Root is a React element. Here is self-closed, and the React element are objects. It is concretely object, and properties. Root, there is a properties path, and that properties date ID, it is variable date ID, it is part of the it is go in date, because all this root is calling for date. We call date like function in date. We call function. Here is we call this function. Here is we call this function. Name and brackets. Name and brackets. And the result of that function we assign variable. Here is params, here is date. Also, this root element, there is two properties. One is path, and on the right side is value. Here is value is variable. Columns date ID variable. And properties element equal date two properties go with root, and when we choose in menu that root, concretely root, that data will have imported that properties. Will have imported data component is concretely would be open, and path ID is connected, is like import in data component. It is calling of data component and give data component path variable, concretely syntax name of path variable. And because of that, in date we have this date ID. It coming from root, calling open date and give path. It is behind the scene, it is in background, we don't see that, but because of that, here is date ID. Params.dateID. Date ID is properties of params, and you see, useParams is about a web address. It is about concretely parameters of web address. Parameters of web address is variable in web address. In our case, it is integer 1, 2, 3, 4, and root element is about address, also about address, and root element there is a path. Column date ID is concretely means is connected with variable date ID. It is variable, it is concretely parameter in address, and syntax of that parameters is date ID. We call it date ID. Because of that, date ID variable go in date, concretely component, date, and date have date ID here, and it is circle that it is like that possible to have ID, number ID, concretely number ID. Parse integer is control that it is number. Because of that, I have in database I write one ID 1, 2, 3 without quotas. If I make quota here, it will not work. Without quota, it means a number. But here in database, it is number. But in web address, it is always string. There is a number. There is no numbers in we have numbers, but they are string. React, all in web address, also in parameter, also variable in 1, 2, 3, see as string. And because of that, we need convert it in a number here in date, because useParams take it from web address, and this is our parameters from address is inside that object. It is inside it properties, and it is string. And because of parse integer, we convert that string in number. And here is number 1, 2, 3. Parse integer, there is two parameters. One is number, and second is base of that number. In our concretely cases, parameters .date ID is 1, 2, 3 is integer, comma, and we know that it is base 10. Get date, have a number. What return get date? Look at database, get date, singular, get date, return object from database, return ID, title, and text. Concretely for that, if it is one, return this object, title, text, and back to date, and because of that, date.title, date.text, and we have what we have. It is text and it is title. This is date, singular, date component, title and text, and this is datus. This is datus. Datus. Look at the datus. Dates. There is a dates. It is dates. It is get dates, and get dates return complete database, all object. Look at database, plural, get dates, return dates, and dates, return dates, dates is complete all object. One object, 2, 3, we have 3 objects. And dates, here in get dates, import that function from database, and create, declare, and instantiate variable dates equal get dates. And what it is dates, complete array. It is array, this array, complete array, constant dates, return dates, complete array. This is array. Dates, plural, and after that we have dates is array, concretely our database array. Return, that function get dates, return. Dates is array, dot map is a method of array. Every arrays there is a method map or function map. Always there is a arrow function for parameter. Parameter of map is arrow function, and that arrow function here concretely we write here parameter date, And in body of that arrow function, we have a link construction. And for every member in dates, we create link. In that link, there is no anything new. Syntax is as before. We spoke about that in video before, in video sometimes. And return of that, you look at here is curly brackets, and here is curly brackets, and all together is a block, is one block. It is like one separate program, one separate software. And the result of that software is links. Links, how many date title we have. In our situation, I always said that we have 3, but we have maybe 4. I look at free. Here it is free. 1, 2, 3. Datas, and link. It will be by Bible transform in HTML, A, href, etc. And here is title, and it will be transferred by Bible, etc. Transfer in anchorage in HTML. When you look at F12 and you look at that anchorage, that HTML, and it's all for that. It's all for that. It's all for this video. I think that I was very concentrate, and that I said all about news here in story about parameters, use params function. Thank you for watching this video.